Most people believe muscle loss after 60 is permanent. But when you open the body, not in theory, but in surgery, you see something surprising. Muscle does not disappear with age. It simply goes dormant, waiting for the right signal to wake up again. Most people think muscle loss after 60 is like rust on metal, something permanent that cannot be reversed. But when you look at the human body closely, especially through the eyes of a doctor who has seen muscles from the inside, you realize that muscle loss is rarely about disappearance and almost always about silence. Muscles are living tissue, and like people, they respond to attention, signals, and purpose. When those signals fade, muscles don't vanish overnight, they simply stop responding. I've seen this countless times while examining older patients, and the pattern is always the same. The muscle fibers are still there, the structure is still intact, but the communication between the brain and the muscle has weakened over time, much like an old phone that still works but no longer receives clear signals. Think about how daily life changes after 60. A person who once walked everywhere now prefers sitting. Stairs are avoided. Heavy grocery bags are split into smaller ones. Chairs replace floor sitting, and slowly without realizing it. The body is told again and again that strength is no longer required. Muscles listen very carefully to these messages. When they hear "you're not needed," they conserve energy by shrinking. This isn't failure, it's efficiency. The body is always trying to save resources. From a medical perspective, this is not damage, it is adaptation. I remember a patient named Robert, 67 years old, who came in convinced his muscles were gone forever. He used to work with his hands, lifting, carrying, moving all day. After retirement, his days became quieter. Within 2 years, he felt weak standing up from a chair, and assumed age had finally caught up with him. When I examined him, his muscle tissue was not destroyed, it was underused. Like a road no longer traveled, grass had grown over it, but the road was still there. When we explained this to him, something shifted psychologically. He stopped seeing his body as broken and started seeing it as asleep. Doctors know this well because when we operate or examine muscle tissue, we don't see old muscle and young muscle as separate categories. We see used muscle and unused muscle. The nervous system plays the lead role here. Muscles do not decide to grow or shrink on their own. They respond to electrical signals from the brain. When those signals weaken due to inactivity, muscles shrink. When the signals return, even gently, muscles respond again, even in later decades of life. This is where one simple movement becomes powerful. Not a heavy workout, not painful strain, but a slow, intentional movement that tells the nervous system this muscle matters. Standing up from a chair slowly, sitting back down with control, holding onto a counter and lifting one heel, then the other. These movements may look small, but to the nervous system they are loud messages. They say coordination is needed, balance is needed, strength is needed. Surgeons and doctors trust these movements because they see what happens when patients use them consistently. The body adapts again. I've seen patients in their 70s regain visible muscle tone, not because they lifted heavy weights, but because they restored communication. One woman, Mary, 72, was afraid of falling and avoided movement. Her muscles weakened further because fear taught her body to stay still. When she began simple chair-based movements, done daily while watching television, her confidence returned first, then her strength followed. The science behind this is simple but profound. Muscles grow when they are asked to work just beyond their comfort zone, not when they are shocked or punished. Right here, if you're watching this and thinking about your own body, ask yourself one honest question and write it in the comments. Do you feel weaker because your body is failing or because it hasn't been invited to be strong lately? And if this way of understanding aging feels different, if it brings a sense of relief or clarity, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, not as a favor, but as a signal that this kind of calm, honest health information matters to you and others like you. What many people don't realize is that muscle loss accelerates when the brain stops trusting the body. Balance exercises rebuild that trust. Strength movements restore confidence in motion. From a medical standpoint, rebuilding muscle after 60 is less about rebuilding tissue and more about rebuilding dialogue. The body is incredibly conservative. It will not invest energy into muscle unless it is convinced that muscle will be used. Once that belief returns, growth follows naturally. Everyday activities are the best examples. Think of a door hinge that hasn't been opened in years. It becomes stiff, not broken. The first few movements are slow, noisy, resistant, but with regular use, smoothness returns. Muscles behave the same way. The body is not keeping score of your age, it is responding to your habits. Doctors see this truth again and again. When movement becomes meaningful again, muscles respond, strength returns, and aging stops feeling like decline and starts feeling like adaptation. After 60, one of the most misunderstood changes in the body is not the loss of muscle itself, but the weakening of the signals that tell muscle what to do. From a medical point of view, muscle is not an independent machine, it is a responsive tissue that waits for instruction. Those instructions come as tiny electrical impulses from the nervous system, traveling from the brain down the spinal cord through nerves and into individual muscle fibers. When life is active, those signals are frequent and clear. When movement slows, those signals become quieter, less coordinated, and eventually inconsistent. The muscle does not disappear because of age, it shrinks because it is no longer being spoken to with confidence. Doctors often see this during recovery periods. A patient may spend just a few weeks resting after illness or surgery, and suddenly they feel dramatically weaker. The muscle tissue itself has not been destroyed in that short time. What has changed is the brain's expectation. The nervous system has learned that these muscles are not required right now, so it reduces the frequency and intensity of its signals. This is why weakness after 60 can feel sudden and frightening, even though the underlying structure is still present. The body has simply adapted to a quieter lifestyle. In daily life, this shows up in small ways. Standing up becomes something you do with momentum instead of control. You push off armrests instead of using your legs. You avoid uneven ground. Each of these choices sends information back to the brain. It tells the nervous system that balance is risky, that strength is optional, that stability can be outsourced to furniture. Over time, the brain adjusts its messaging accordingly. It stops sending strong, precise signals to muscles that are no longer trusted. From a surgeon's perspective, when you look at muscle tissue during procedures, you don't see fragility as the main issue. You see understimulation. The fibers are thinner, less densely packed, but still capable of responding. What is missing is not potential, but activation. This is why simple, controlled movements are so powerful after 60. They reawaken communication pathways. They remind the nervous system how to coordinate contraction and relaxation in harmony. Consider a patient named Helen, 69 years old, who believed her legs were just old now. She avoided stairs, sat most of the day, and felt unsteady when walking. When she began slow chair-based movements, something unexpected happened. Her balance improved before her strength did. This is because balance is primarily a neurological skill. The brain must constantly adjust muscle tension in response to tiny shifts in position. When seated exercises challenge posture, weight transfer, and controlled movement, the nervous system becomes more alert. It sharpens its signals. This is why rebuilding muscle after 60 is not about force but about precision. Heavy weights can overwhelm a nervous system that has grown cautious. Slow, intentional movements invite it back into conversation. They allow the brain to practice timing, coordination, and control without fear. When that happens, muscles begin to respond again, not because they are being punished into growth, but because they are being invited to participate. Even something as simple as lifting one foot slightly while seated requires a complex chain of communication. The brain must activate stabilizing muscles, adjust posture, maintain balance, and control the moving limb. Each repetition strengthens not just muscle fibers, but neural pathways. Doctors understand this well, because loss of coordination often precedes loss of strength. When coordination improves, strength follows naturally. Aging does not turn off the nervous system. It simply makes it more selective. It prioritizes safety over performance. When movement feels unpredictable, the brain limits output. When movement feels controlled and familiar, it increases confidence. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. A few minutes of daily movement trains the nervous system to expect activity. Once that expectation is set, muscles receive clearer signals. The fear many seniors feel about movement actually reinforces weakness. Fear tells the brain that the environment is unsafe. The nervous system responds by tightening some muscles and shutting down others, leading to stiffness, imbalance, and fatigue. Gentle seated exercises reduce fear because they feel secure. They create a safe space for the nervous system to practice sending signals again. From a medical standpoint, this is one of the most hopeful truths about aging. You are not rebuilding muscle from nothing. You are restoring a relationship between brain and body that already exists. The nervous system is adaptable at any age. It learns through repetition, attention, and feedback. When you move with awareness, you are teaching your brain that strength is still required, balance is still valuable, and your muscles still have a role to play in daily life. One of the quiet realities of aging is that muscle loss after 60 is rarely caused by age alone. It is driven by how the body prioritizes energy. From a biological perspective, the body is always making decisions about where to invest its resources. Muscle tissue is expensive to maintain. It requires protein, oxygen, blood flow, and constant repair. When the body senses that a muscle is not being regularly used, it slowly reduces investment, not as a punishment, but as a survival strategy. This is why inactivity, even more than aging, accelerates muscle decline. In everyday life, this process happens subtly. A person may stop squatting to pick things up and instead bend forward. They may stop carrying groceries and ask for help. They may sit longer because standing feels tiring. Each of these choices signals to the body that certain muscles are no longer essential for survival. Over time, the body reallocates nutrients and energy away from those muscles towards systems it believes are more critical, such as the brain and vital organs. Muscle loss, then, is not failure. It is adaptation based on perceived demand. Doctors often explain this using the concept of use it, but that phrase oversimplifies a deeper truth. It is not just movement that matters, but meaningful movement. Random activity does little if it does not challenge coordination, stability, and controlled effort. This is why slow, intentional chair exercises can be more effective than rushed walking or unfocused activity. They send a clear message to the body: these muscles are still needed, still useful, still worth maintaining. From a clinical viewpoint, one of the first things lost with muscle decline is not size, but endurance. Muscles fatigue quickly because their internal energy systems become less efficient. Mitochondria, the tiny structures inside muscle cells that produce energy, reduce in number and function when activity decreases. This is why seniors often say, "I feel weak so quickly." It is not that the muscle is gone, it is that its energy factories have gone quiet. The good news is that mitochondria respond rapidly to gentle, repeated movement. A patient named Robert, 72 years old, once described his legs as feeling empty, as if they had no power reserve. He assumed this was permanent. When he began seated leg extensions and slow controlled lifts, he noticed something surprising after a few weeks. He did not just feel stronger, he felt less tired doing simple tasks. This reflects a biological shift. His muscles were becoming metabolically active again. Blood flow improved. Oxygen delivery increased. Energy production became more efficient. This is why rebuilding muscle after 60 is deeply connected to restoring circulation. Muscles act like pumps. When they contract, they help move blood and lymph through the body. Inactivity leads to stagnation, which reduces nutrient delivery and waste removal. Gentle exercises reverse this process without stressing joints or the heart. They reintroduce rhythm into the system. The body thrives on rhythm, especially in later years. Another overlooked aspect is how muscle communicates with the immune system. Active muscles release signaling molecules that reduce inflammation and support tissue repair. When muscles are inactive, chronic low-grade inflammation increases, which further accelerates muscle breakdown. This creates a cycle that many doctors see but few explain clearly. Weak muscles increase inflammation, and inflammation weakens muscles. The cycle can be interrupted with simple, consistent movement. Psychologically, muscle decline often carries emotional weight. Seniors may internalize weakness as personal failure. From a medical standpoint, this belief is harmful. The body responds to belief through stress hormones. When someone feels helpless, cortisol levels rise, which directly contributes to muscle loss. Calm, achievable exercises reduce stress responses. They tell the nervous system that effort is safe. This hormonal shift alone can preserve muscle tissue. From the inside, muscle fibers are remarkably patient. Even after long periods of disuse, many fibers remain dormant rather than destroyed. They wait for signals to reactivate. This is why small movements can produce noticeable changes. The body remembers strength. It simply needs permission to express it again. Chair exercises provide that permission in a controlled, non-threatening way. What matters most is not how much resistance is used, but how often muscles are reminded of their purpose. Daily movement, even brief, tells the body to keep muscle tissue alive. It shifts energy priorities. It restores communication between systems. Aging does not erase the body's ability to rebuild. It changes the rules under which rebuilding occurs. When those rules are respected, muscle responds with quiet resilience. When surgeons look inside the body, they see something very different from what most people imagine when they think about aging muscles. They do not see muscles simply melting away because of time. What they see is a pattern. Some muscles remain surprisingly strong, well supplied with blood, and structurally intact even in very old patients, while others appear thin, underused, and disconnected from regular movement. This contrast teaches an important lesson about how the body chooses what to preserve. From a surgeon's perspective, the muscles that survive aging best are the ones most closely tied to daily survival tasks. Muscles involved in posture, balance, and controlled movement often remain healthier than muscles used only for power or speed. This is because the body values stability over strength as it ages. Standing up from a chair, maintaining balance while walking, and stabilizing joints send constant signals to the nervous system that these muscles are essential. The body responds by protecting them. This explains why chair-based movements are so effective. They directly activate the very muscles surgeons see holding up best inside the body. When a senior slowly presses their feet into the floor while seated, the deep muscles of the hips and thighs engage. When they sit tall and control their posture, spinal stabilizers activate. These muscles are deeply wired into survival and balance, which means the brain prioritizes maintaining them. Surgeons also observe that muscles connected to joints with regular movement maintain better tissue quality. Joints that move daily receive more fluid, nutrients, and oxygen. Muscles around those joints stay healthier. When movement stops, stiffness increases, circulation drops, and muscle tissue loses its internal organization. From the inside, inactivity looks less like aging and more like neglect. This is why even gentle, pain-free motion can dramatically change how muscle tissue ages. Another critical observation is that muscle fibers rarely disappear completely. Even in advanced age, surgeons see fibers that are thin but present, like wires that have not carried current in a long time. These fibers can be reactivated. The limitation is not structural damage, but lack of stimulation. Slow, controlled movements restore electrical signaling from nerves to muscle fibers, bringing them back into functional use. Doctors also notice differences in muscle color and texture. Active muscles appear richer in color, indicating healthy blood flow. Inactive muscles appear pale, reflecting reduced circulation. Chair exercises increase local blood flow without stressing the cardiovascular system. This gentle increase in circulation nourishes muscle tissue and supports repair. which is especially important when healing capacity is lower with age. From a clinical standpoint, surgeons understand that protecting muscle is about reducing strain, not increasing it. Overloading aging joints can damage connective tissue and discourage movement. Controlled seated exercises avoid this risk. They respect the limits of the aging body while still delivering the signals muscles need to stay alive and responsive. What surgeons see repeatedly is that the body responds best to consistency, not intensity. Muscles that are used daily, even lightly, remain cooperative. They stay integrated into the body's movement patterns. Aging does not eliminate the body's ability to maintain muscle. It refines which muscles are protected and why. And understanding this allows movement to work with biology instead of against it. One of the most misunderstood aspects of rebuilding muscle after 60 is the belief that progress comes from pushing harder, lifting heavier, or enduring discomfort. In reality, the aging body responds far more effectively to consistency than to intensity. From a biological standpoint, the nervous system becomes more sensitive with age, not weaker. It reacts strongly to sudden stress, strain, or unfamiliar load. When movement feels threatening, the brain activates protective mechanisms that limit muscle activation rather than enhance it. This is why aggressive exercise often leads to soreness, fatigue, or avoidance instead of strength in older adults. Consistency sends a different message. When the body experiences the same gentle movement repeatedly, it recognizes safety. Muscles begin to engage more fully because the nervous system no longer perceives risk. This process is gradual but powerful. Daily chair exercises, even for short periods, establish a predictable rhythm that the body learns to trust. Over time, this trust allows muscles to contract more efficiently, improving strength without strain. In medical practice, doctors often see patients who attempted to fix muscle loss quickly and ended up discouraged. One woman, Elaine, in her late 60s, joined a high-intensity class after being told she needed to build muscle fast. Within weeks, her knees hurt, her back felt unstable, and she stopped exercising entirely. When she switched to seated strength movements done slowly each day, her pain decreased and her confidence returned. The difference was not the exercise itself, but the consistency and control with which it was performed. From a physiological perspective, muscle adaptation depends on repeated signaling. Each contraction sends a message to the muscle fibers and the surrounding tissues. When these signals arrive regularly, even at low intensity, the body invests in maintaining those fibers. When signals are sporadic and intense, the body becomes defensive. Hormones associated with stress increase, recovery slows, and muscle breakdown can actually accelerate. Consistency also protects joints and connective tissue. Tendons and ligaments adapt more slowly than muscle, especially with age. High-intensity movement places sudden demands on these structures, increasing injury risk. Gentle, repeated motion strengthens connective tissue gradually, improving joint stability. This stability, in turn, allows muscles to function more effectively. Strength is not isolated in muscle alone. It is supported by the entire movement system. Another important factor is habit formation. Daily manageable exercises become part of routine life. They no longer require motivation or willpower. From a neurological standpoint, habits reduce cognitive load. The brain does not have to decide whether to move. Movement becomes automatic. This consistency benefits mental health as well. Regular movement reduces anxiety and supports cognitive clarity, both of which indirectly influence muscle health. The aging body values predictability. Blood sugar regulation, hormone balance, and energy distribution all function better when routines are stable. Consistent movement contributes to this stability. Muscles receive steady blood flow, nutrients are delivered more efficiently, and waste products are removed regularly. Over time, this environment supports muscle maintenance and gradual improvement. Doctors who work with older adults often emphasize that progress should feel almost subtle. Strength returns quietly. Balance improves without announcement. Everyday tasks become easier before muscles visibly change. This is how the body prefers to adapt later in life. Loud signals like pain or exhaustion are signs that the approach is misaligned with biology. Consistency also preserves independence. When muscles are engaged daily, seniors maintain the ability to stand, walk, and stabilize themselves. These abilities are not built in a single session. They are protected through repetition. Share exercises provide a safe foundation for this repetition, especially for those with balance concerns or limited mobility. Ultimately, rebuilding muscle after 60 is less about challenging the body and more about cooperating with it. Gentle, consistent movement respects the body's current priorities while still encouraging growth. Aging does not remove the body's capacity to strengthen. It changes the language through which strength must be requested, and consistency speaks that language clearly.